today's show, we have the Kiwi kite surfer, Aidrian Kerr, originally from New Zealand, and he's lived in the UAE for almost 20 years, currently residing in Ras Al Khaimah. Aidrian is the presenter and founder of Kite Surf 365, the podcast for kite surfers. His podcast has quickly become the go-to podcast for kite surfers, and as fans of his show says, it keeps the fizz alive when they are not in the water. His first episode dropped in December 2017. He is currently on episode 81. So far, he's had an impressive lineup of guests on the show. In one of his most recent podcasts, he interviewed Jalou Blangerie, 3 times kite surfing champion. His back catalogue features Kia Diabots, 4 times kite surfing champion, Jessie Richmond, Karolina Wikowska, 3 times kite surfing champion, Australian Ewan Jaspen, and Mikhail Sol, the 14-year-old Brazilian professional kite surfer. Kite Surf 365 have recently teamed up with the prestigious kite surfing magazine, The Kite Mag. So with his experience, Aidrian can tell us a thing or two about what it takes to start your own podcast. He's helped me a lot with my show, and I feel that with his experience and knowledge, he can help anyone out there who is interested in starting their own podcast. Really pleased to have him as a guest on the show today. Please welcome Aidrian Kerr.
Thank you very much. That was one hell of an introduction.
Yeah. Thank you. You're one hell of a guy.
Thank you.
Okay, so Aidrian, take us back to 2017 when you first started your podcast. What was the inspiration behind it for you?
I actually had a podcast. Actually, the story actually goes back further than that. I actually had another podcast before that with a friend of mine called Ty Pichelle, and it was called The Brew. And The Brew was based around 2 guys go to a bar and tell stories, and it was and actually had mild success, but it was sort of it probably wasn't really becoming of the person I really wanted to be, because we used to just drink a whole lot of beers and then sit around and record these ridiculous podcasts, and we actually started to get people from overseas coming on, and it got to a stage where it was actually starting to affect our careers because we were both teachers at the time, and students were listening to it, and it really wasn't becoming of who we are within the society. So we stopped that under some administrative pressure, let's say. And about 18 months, maybe 2 years went by before I sort of found another thing I really wanted to podcast about. I was already kite surfing at the time, and but I used to go on these kite trips, and I used to go to these bars and have these amazing conversations. And the great thing about kite surfing is that you have people from all different walks of life, all different ages, religions, everything, and they all come together for this one love of being on the water, kite surfing. So I used to meet these amazing people, and I just thought, hey, this is a great idea. Why don't I start capturing these stories? And originally the whole idea behind the podcast was to, just bring the attention to kite surfing, create content for people who are new to kiteboarding, people who wanted to get into kiteboarding. And really, I was just initially just talking to my friends, I was just interviewing my friends and getting out that. But as it sort of started to grow, I started to get some momentum and reaching out to more people, and sort of more people started to come on the show. And it really just started from there, it really started as an idea to share stories. And it's just built into something else,
Did you realize at the time when you first started it that it was going to be as big in the kite surfing world as it is today?
No, not at all. I mean, really, I at the time I thought it was successful, it was, I'd sort of the first 20 episodes, I thought, oh, this is going really, really well. And it was going well. And I had very, very good kite surfers coming on the show at that stage, I was working hard for it. And, but I just sort of, let's say I sort of stumbled through that first year, even though at the time I thought I was doing amazing. I thought, this is amazing. It's incredible. And, but then when I started to really get feedback from people, and people were coming back to me, I was really, oh, wow, I'm actually, I felt like a bit of a responsibility when I got around 50 episodes, well, maybe 40 episodes, that if I didn't put something out of, let's say, to a certain level or whatever, and I can talk about the quality of podcasts later on because that's kind of important too, that I sort of really gathered momentum. I started working harder and harder. And just to give you an example, like, I work a normal day, I get home and some, a lot of nights a week, I do 4 or 5 hours on the podcast, just preparing or editing or reaching out to people and emailing. It's almost become like a second, job,
So for
which
those that don't know, what do you do? What else do you do apart from your?
I'm a school teacher. Yeah, I'm a teacher. I'm teaching PE. Don't do so much PE teaching anymore. I'm a little bit more in administration, but I'm a PE teacher.
Take us down to the very basics and give us a step-by-step guide on what you have to do initially to get your podcast off the ground.
Yeah, look, I mean, basically, first of all, you've got to have an idea and you've got to do something and you've got to be passionate about it, passionate about the idea that you're doing. And once you get that passion, you sort of need to think, okay, what am I going to do to record these? Like, I'm always fighting with this thing, quality versus, let's say, the quality of the podcast versus the content of the podcast. And look, if you talk to any creator will always tell you that the content and what's been said is the most important thing. Okay, so I mean, arguably, you can start a podcast with a cell phone. You can just put a cell phone between two people and record. And I've actually done, funny story, I've actually done some of my podcasts later on where the internet broke down or the what's the name didn't work and I couldn't get a connection and I lost a bit of thing. And I've actually recorded the podcast using WhatsApp Messenger. I would send him a message and he would WhatsApp message me back and I would just edit that in. And to the listeners, they would never know. So again, I'm always fighting with that. The content is always more important than the quality of the production. But then as you become more perfectionist, you do talk about, let's say the quality of the product becomes important too. But the basic idea is you've got to have an idea and something you're passionate about and something that you want to share. That's really what it comes down to. And I love talking about kite surfing. It was just a natural fit. So I thought I'd start. That was the key idea, was to share stories.
Amazing. Okay, so first of all, it's the concept. Once you've got your concept and you decide what it is that you would like to talk about, where do they take it from there?
Yeah, well, I mean, firstly, you just need to start recording stuff, and I guess the first thing is actually getting basic recording gear. And as I said, you can actually record on a phone. You can get great lapel mics now that have like a dual head lapel mic into a single 3.5 cable. And I know lots of guys who just record it on their Samsung or iPhone. They've got great digital recorders. They just clip on the lapel mics and they just record it on their phone. And that's the first part. The essence is capturing the audio, because editing the audio is like a step 2, right? But I would say the first thing to do is just start off simple and start off small. And get a couple of lapel mics and just start recording audio first. Do 4 or 5 or 10 tests where you sit down with your friend and just talk back and forward, because an important part of the podcast is also, as the host, is learning, when to talk and when not to talk. So you want to sort of practice that, give and take part of a good episode. Like, I think it's actually really important. There's a famous MMA podcaster called Ariel Hawani, and he said someone gave him some good advice, and I took that to heart. And the advice is simple: is don't be the show. You're not the show. All you are is a medium facilitating this information that whoever the person's giving it to you, to the listeners. So I always try to think like opener, make my questions short and long and open-ended so the person can talk, and I would sit back and listen. So practice, get an idea, get some equipment and start practicing.